Future Commerce is brought to you by Octane AI. Let me ask you a question. Do you want to leverage more customer data and increase your revenue at your brand? The answer should be yes and yes. And with Octane AI, every Shopify and Shopify Plus merchant can do just that. Learn about your customers and collect buyer profile data with engaging quizzes and create personalized campaigns and flows using Facebook Messenger and SMS. Octane AI has plans for any sized business, and Future Commerce listeners get 10% off your first 6 months. So go sign up right now at octaneai.com/future. That's octaneai.com/future. This episode of Future Commerce is brought to you by Wix. That's right, Wix. The industry-leading content management platform is now also an industry-leading e-commerce platform with advanced online storefront features and over 700,000 active stores already selling worldwide. Find out if Wix is right for you by going to wix.com/e-commerce today. That's Wix, wix.com/e-commerce, or listen to the middle of the show to find out more about how they can transform your business. Future Commerce is brought to you by Blue Shift. 77% of consumers make brand choices based on personalized experiences. Here's my question, are they choosing you? Well, Blue Shift allows e-commerce companies to move from batch and blast and one-size-fits-all experiences to something much more custom. You can find out more today about what Blue Shift does for your brand at blueshift.com/futurecommerce. That's blueshift.com/futurecommerce. Hello and welcome to Future Commerce, the podcast about the next generation of commerce. I'm Phillip. Today we have Keith Richamn, who's the co-founder and CEO of Boosted Commerce, and we're going to talk a little bit today about something we haven't really covered on this show in much detail, and that's roll-ups. To my kids, fruit roll-ups are a treat, and I think Boosted Commerce is going to be a little bit of a treat to talk about today. Keith, say hi to the audience.
Hey, everybody. That's the best intro I've gotten. I think these are FBA roll-ups are a treat as well. So thank you for having me.
What's fruit by the acre? I don't know. What's FBA? That's fulfillment by Amazon. Tell me a little bit about what Boosted's trying to do in the ecosystem.
Yeah, so Boosted Commerce is building an e-commerce platform to distribute sort of the most up-and-coming brands on a global basis. My background is actually it comes from the entrepreneurial side of the world. I've basically been an entrepreneur for over 25 years now, and I started out in the payments and software business, did some stuff in media. Most recently, I started the micromobility provider in Europe called Voice Technology. As I was sort of thinking about what would be interesting to do next, really started digging into some of the trends that were happening in the consumer products landscape. And the more I learned about sort of the transformation of what was happening in terms of challenger brands and what I like to call the democratization of product development, the more excited I got about the space. And so we started Boosted really as a way of identifying these amazing businesses and brands that people have created. And then our special sauce is building an infrastructure that enables us to scale them and grow them in a way that potentially the founders of the business either couldn't or, frankly, in many cases could, but just didn't have the risk appetite to go do themselves.
So, in essence, and it seems like there's a few players in the space who've all sort of picked different lanes. You guys chose Amazon. Why the Amazon brand? Why is that compelling as a market for creating, holding co and consolidating some of those into single operations?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. First, we actually actively look at all types of businesses, ones that are based on Shopify, even some. We've even looked at some stuff that's purely retail distributed. But Amazon remains extremely appealing for a few reasons. From a diligence standpoint, it's sort of a unifying factor, and it's a level setter, so that when you look at businesses, you're looking at a single source of truth from the Amazon ecosystem. And that makes comparing businesses really simple. And it allows you to get a quick glance as to the health of the business and the historical performance of the business, particularly as it relates to other businesses that you own or ones that you've seen. And so that, unlike other sort of platforms, when everything comes from a single piece, a single data source, it makes everything from the due diligence to the close process much more efficient.
For sure. Yeah.
And that is something we really truly value. Second, and this is stating the obvious, is it's the world's largest shopping mall. And our underlying thesis is that Amazon is only going to increase in importance over time if we can buy what we call Fifth Avenue real estate within the Amazon platform and demonstrate and build on a continual basis sort of the knowledge on how to win in this shopping mall. We're only going to be positioning ourselves for great long-term success.
Yeah, I mean that's such an interesting point of view. There it's a very it's almost normalized in its ways that most of those brands they're all operating by the same rules. They have similar skill sets. They have similar challenges. They all have to solve the same kinds of problems, which in my mind brings a lot of operational excellence, or what would you say, almost like the ability to when bringing them together to be able to consolidate some of the overlapping needs that each one of them have in their insular businesses, and then they have the ability to sort of compete at scale and bring those various and disparate tech. All of those capabilities that are in-house that are sort of diffuse now are actually coming together. Is that how you're operating, where now they're all being able to share data, share expertise, and share resources?
Yeah. I think, at its core, I'll even take it back one level, Phillip, because I think what is true for, and you and I were talking about this right before we started. We're living in a platform world now. Whether you're sort of playing in the Google ecosystem, the Facebook ecosystem, the Apple ecosystem, or the Amazon ecosystem, you are beholden to either one or more partners whose sandbox and playground you need to learn a lot about. And what's fascinating in each of those cases is, because of their strength and their ability to hire and retain incredible people, the pace of change in each of these sandboxes has increased pretty rapidly over time. So I'll use YouTube as an example. Backing up for a minute, YouTube used to do 2 algorithm changes a year. And I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, they moved that to 5, and then it was 10. And then they did a leap from like 10 to 300 algorithm changes in 1 year. And we're starting to see that on Amazon. And so in a world where there's constant change and where the algorithm is a living, breathing component of your business, what I think we bring to the table is the ability to invest resources, time, and engineering talent into understanding what those changes are and staying on top of them. So yes, there's a lot of synergy on the supply chain. There's a lot of knowledge sharing on marketing, but it's just a deep understanding as to how do you own and control, to the extent possible, the sandbox that we really try to invest our time and energy in. The other stuff is there, and there's clear synergies across the board, from everything relating to a new rule to, oh my God, this kind of image is working now. We should all use these kinds of images, right? But it's more of a broader understanding as to the Amazon ecosystem that we can share amongst all the people that run the day-to-day operations of the business.
This sort of leads me to, what are the factors you look for in potential acquisition? Outside of their, we've talked about talent to some degree. Are there specific trends, or specific industries or verticals? Categories. Oh my gosh, I just used all 3 of those words interchangeably. Holy cow. It's specific categories that you're looking for to make an investment in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what's interesting is there are so many good businesses out there, and there are so many great founders and operators. And probably my greatest joy in starting the business and on a day-to-day basis is getting to hear their stories of how they've accomplished what they've done. When it comes to what we look for in particular, we have sort of a criteria list of, I'll call it, dozens at this point, but it's probably more, of things that we look at, and they're both internal signals within Amazon and external signals. Those are all there. I could walk through, more of the scientific terms, but really, at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out if there's a there, to put it colloquially, and do we believe that this product set or brand has or will continue to show signs of longevity? And there's a lot of things we look at there to indicate. I think beyond that, I think what we have done more of than others in the sort of aggregator, quote unquote, aggregator space, although we don't love that term, is focus on health, wellness, and food and ingestibles. And those are products that we believe both have incredible secular momentum in terms of shifts in how people think about them and what we're seeing in sort of people's willingness to try challenger brands, and also have great sort of economics around them because of the repeat purchase ability. So I think we tend to look for sort of a long list of sort of things ranging from the financial profile to obviously its history on Amazon, to how it ranks outside of Amazon, within the Google ecosystem, is there a social footprint, et cetera, et cetera. And then within that, we tend to try to find businesses who have sort of a certain set of characteristics that are unique to, I think, us as a buyer.
So it's interesting. So, the name of this show is Future Commerce, and I've definitely been accused of in the past focusing on the right now commerce. How much of what you are doing investing existing businesses is trying to predict where the market's going to be in the next 2 to 3 years? And I'll center that specifically on a recent acquisition that you all had made in Astorwood Naturals, which I think is a skincare company.
Yeah.
What is what do you see, or are you looking into a crystal ball and saying, this as a category, luxury skincare is a thing that is quite durable and could grow to a certain degree, and by this acquisition or a series of acquisitions, we're positioning for the market's going to be as opposed to where it is right now?
Yes, and I guess if you've ever been to the improv, any improv
class.
Yeah,
sure have.
I think what we look for are signs of durability. Number one, I think even before that, we look: do we want to own this brand? Is this something that we actually want to own? And that when we assign it to a brand manager internally, are they going to be fired up coming in and thinking about this? And so in the case of Astorwood, it actually fit those criteria and more, because, at its core, if you look at, again, trends, what you have is sort of a shift and a willingness to try differentiated beauty products, and in particular, sort of more niche ingredient-based products that are a single solve. So if you look at, it used to be that there was a one skin cream that people would put on. There's now, various types for various parts of your face, your body, et cetera. And I think what they had demonstrated with the hyaluronic acid product was the ability to create at an affordable budget a luxury type product with a luxury type brand. And we look at that. We look at the packaging of the product. We look at sort of the brand elements that they had created, and sort of the NPS score that you could tell from people who had purchased it, along with the secular trend, and it just gets us really excited about where we can position not only the core product today, but also sort of a suite of products in the future.
There's, how much of your potential acquisition target do you think changes in the next few years where maybe historically where there wasn't so many of these aggregators in the space. Again, we don't like that word, but now there's a lot of news around that, right? How many businesses will start to architect for exit as opposed to those that are just healthy businesses by virtue of running solid, running a solid brand that's an Amazon brand? And does that change the landscape going forward? Is that more appetizing or less appetizing for you?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess when we look at the market size from a buying standpoint, there are, by any count that we see, north of 40,000 sort of sellers on Amazon alone. And I think when we market sized Shopify, it was around 6,000 on Shopify. So there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50,000 sellers who have some general characteristics, if not specific ones that we really like. And so within that bucket, you're going to find all types. And people ask, why do founders want to sell? And the answer is, well, not all of them do. We talk to thousands of people a year, and we're only doing maybe 50 deals a year, or 30 deals a year, depending on the year. And so there is a sort of predisposition, I think, to ask the question you're asking. But the reality is you're going to get all types. From a buyer standpoint, I don't think we have in the past, nor will we in the future discriminate against people whose whole goal was to start a business and package it for sale. As someone in the sort of startup space outside of commerce, that's what a lot of companies do. They build a social tool and they hope to make it into a company, but they kind of know if they're successful that there might be a buyer in a Facebook or a Twitter. I think that what's unique about this ecosystem is maybe the speed at which you can get profitable doing that. And that's what's really exciting is, even when we look at people and founders who have packaged or created a business that they knowingly were going to try to sell within a relatively quick time frame, at least they've done what a lot of companies in the traditional Silicon Valley ecosystem has, and they've managed to show a profit. And so, when we look at it, we're like, wow, it's still a great potential opportunity because they've shown they can do what is really hard to do.
Yep.
And that's, make money.
I mean, increasingly harder now in that the platform that is that we've just called the digital Fifth Avenue, although it's probably depending on which corner of Amazon you're shopping on, it's more like the digital Sawgrass Mills mall, but it's a whole other story. But you have this
that's a whole other. Yeah, that's very pejorative of you, Philip. I'd like to say,
but I think that you have this really interesting challenge wherein you go to Westfield and there isn't a Westfield kiosk sitting right across from the Claire's trying to sell a Westfield brand of Claire's costume jewelry, right? So you've got, and by the way, I don't even know if Claire's is still in business, to be honest with you. I don't know where I pulled that one out of, trying to think of a boring mall brand.
You should pick Charming Charlie, who's my co-founder.
I wasn't gonna say it. Color coding and all the rest, right? So, but when you have this really interesting paradigm where Amazon and its basics are fundamentally competing with other parts of the its own ecosystem. I mean, it is. You said we're in a platform economy. That is the law of platforms. You eventually compete with the ones who made you successful. If you look at what's happening right now, this very long-winded soliloquy to get to a question. There's a new FTC chair. I don't know if you read the piece. Lena Khan has written this the Yale Law Journal piece about Amazon's antitrust paradox, and this this idea that if you're going to do any sort of surgical antitrust work in the Biden administration and in the FTC, maybe some of that begins in let's spin out AWS. But what do we do at the marketplace end of it? I mean, removing competition with marketplace sellers could be pretty lucrative for those who have built brands on Amazon to have Amazon moved out of the way and competing on basics. I'm curious what you think about this current environment and if you're well positioned to really take advantage of that, where you could see explosive growth to sellers on Amazon if that were to take place.
First of all, in every shopping scenario, other than the one you mentioned, you do, as a seller, often face that challenge. I mean, you walk into Costco and they are selling Kirkland. You walk into a Kroger's and there's a Kroger brand. Rite Aid sells a Rite Aid brand, similar with CVS. And so I don't think this is a unique challenge in the retail space where sellers, distributors try to, launch their own products to both, give themselves opportunity for margin and maybe appeal to a different type of shopper. So when we look at it, and we look at the ecosystem, we say, you know what, like that's their prerogative. And our job as a sort of retailer is to come up with brand promise, brand value, and enough differentiation that the customer wants to buy our product. And that's going to happen. Yeah. I think one of the reasons we like our prospects is, if there ever were instances in the history of the world where, you owned your own distribution or you had the ability to just rest on your laurels, that doesn't exist anymore. And our environment and our culture within the company is built on knowing that there's no ability to rest on laurels and also please today's consumer. So I don't think I think there's been much ado about nothing in terms of the Amazon private label stuff. As it relates to the product, it's going to be really interesting to watch. I don't know if I'm sitting in the Amazon seat, I don't know where I draw the line and what I define as sort of something to go to the mat for. And that's largely true for all these companies. There are so many interrelated pieces of their businesses that fuel the other pieces of the business. And it's going to be fascinating to see where push comes to shove in terms of their willingness to move. But I don't, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't foresee Amazon Basics being something that becomes a massive focal point, because when we look at the data and when we've seen the data in the categories where we compete and there's an Amazon Basics product, it's hard for me to, if you were calling me out in front of Congress, I would tell you that it's not super impactful in my business.
Hey, Phillip here to tell you about our newest sponsor, Octane AI. If you are on Shopify or Shopify Plus, and who isn't, am I right? Then you need what Octane AI has to offer. I am a huge fan of guided selling, and Octane AI has tools that allow you to get to know your customers on a deeper level and collect more buyer profile data. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you can use things like shop quizzes, Facebook Messenger, SMS, and opt-in tools to allow you to engage your customer more personally so you can get on their level. More personalized campaigns and flows across all channel means more ROI. And that ROI that is driven from Octane AI is usable in other platforms with their integrations to other tools you're already using. Brands have already seen incredible results. Up to 16x increase in email signups and a 28% increase in AOV. That's average order value, money in your pocket. What are you waiting for? Octane AI has plans for any sized business, and Future Commerce listeners get 10% off the first 6 months when you sign up. So why don't you sign up today? Go to octaneai.com/future. Once again, that's octaneai.com/future and tell them Phillip sent you. I'm a big fan of using the right tool for the right job. And I'm an even bigger fan of piloting and proving out a capability for your business before you go and throw a ton of money at it. And that's why I am a fan of our newest sponsor at Future Commerce, Wix eCommerce. Wix, the industry-leading content management platform, is now also a growing global e-commerce platform with advanced online storefront features. Solo creators, merch stores, limited releases, micro e-com sites, and oh so much more can be launched in under a day on Wix. Wix eCommerce lets you take control of your customer base and build repeat sales channels with integrated CRM and loyalty tools. Wix might be the right tool for the right job for an entrepreneur, an omnichannel retailer, a brand to get up and run and launch and scale their online stores successfully. Why don't you give it a try? What have you got to lose? Go to wix.com/ecommerce today and join over 700,000 active stores already selling worldwide with Wix e-commerce. That's Wix, Wix.com/ecommerce. It's time once again for me to tell you about our newest partner, Blue Shift. Channel centric, siloed, batch and blast, one size fits all. These are the words no marketer likes to use, and no campaign that your customers want to be a part of. So why do these campaigns still happen? Why? Well, disconnected data and disjointed technology. Blue Shift's Smart Hub CDP connects data and creates personalized omni-channel experiences for leading brands like James Allen and CarParts.com. Blue Shift provides catalogs for AI-driven product recommendations, advanced predictive segmentation capabilities, and creates custom audiences for your first-party data to leverage across almost any media platform so that you, the marketer, can make batch and blast a thing of the past. Learn more at blueshift.com/futurecommerce and get your copy of the Smart Guide to Product Recommendations for e-commerce and retail for free. That's right. Go to blueshift.com/futurecommerce. I think what's interesting is, at least in the analog world, there are pieces of physical infrastructure that aggregate demand, and where that differs in sort of in the world of retail, you have these large pieces of commercial property, and even public infrastructure that funnels traffic into a certain place for other retailers to benefit from. So you have this sort of layered in almost decentralized way of the way that we're like building a funnel of demand into where like the actual exchange of goods happens. It's a little different online, where Amazon is its own advertising engine. It's its own it's its own digital platform, and so it is the arbiter on many levels of both the aggregation of traffic and then the distribution of goods, and ultimately even making some of those products. So I think it's a little different to the mall analogy, but very similar to the Costco analogy. And I quite like that repositioning that you made there. I do think that it's digital breaks the paradigm so much that it's really hard to make these sorts of concrete arguments. I think it is quite iffy. Where do you think you are? Where is it heading? Are we going to see, over the next 5 years, continued explosive growth in e-commerce? I'm guessing that's what you're betting on in your business. How do these brands compete right now to kind of get the scale for you to be viable acquisitions? There's a lot of challenges right now, specifically in supply chain and in customer acquisition costs.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't see those. If you look at all the trends as to what gets us excited about the business, it's also sort of enables other people to start businesses and to compete,
mm-hmm.
which is why it kind of goes back to when I said what we try to invest in and create differentiation around is, number one, on the acquisition side, are we buying things that we think have inherent characteristics of value? And in a lot of, if we can do that well, then we're starting from a great standpoint, a great starting point, excuse me. And then are we building an infrastructure, and can we invest in tools and build tools that enable us to be differentiated? Or maybe, and if not differentiate, at least compete more effectively in these ecosystems, and whether that's our own D2C website, it's Amazon, Walmart, et cetera, et cetera. What's exciting about the space, even with the challenges you mentioned, is the fact that we're still very early. It's so hard to remember that. Like, most goods are still bought in retail. And we are still in the beginning phases of these generational shifts towards brands, and in the utilization of, whether it's Amazon's advertising system, or what happens on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. The brands' ability to understand how to take advantage of these mediums to grow and build a presence. So, as much as the landscape is difficult because of some fundamental factors that you talked about, the overall sort of shift and change of how people think about brands and where they go to find those brands, and then within that, our ability to create better understanding as to those factors just gets us fired up, because we look at, if you sort of break down the market, on one hand, you've got these big CPG companies, and they're super sophisticated, but they're not necessarily nimble, nor is the bulk of their business driven from these emerging platforms. So their focus and sort of internal structure is not sort of built around winning there. And then you've got the smaller businesses who are exceptional operators. We've talked to enough of them to know that, but who, because of the changing nature of the game, are get tired and want to partner with people like us sometimes. And so inherently, we're sort of in this sweet spot of the world right now.
There's and to that end, the shorthand could be, hey, we because of all these challenges, because of supply chain constraints, because of customer acquisition costs, because of IDFA or iOS 14.5, whatever it is. Well, now is a great time for you to have folks that come alongside you who can augment your skills and expertise. Like, why not have a team we can, we're putting together the Avengers initiative. It's the boosted Avenger, right.
Exactly. I love that analogy. I'm gonna steal that too. I like that. What I like about it is, at the end of the day, and this is what we do tell sellers, which is, like, fundamentally, particularly because most of the deals have some form of an earnout component, right? We tell sellers the truth, which is now we work for you. And so, you don't have to be the one working on figuring out your supply chain. We're going to have the guy who ran, supply chain for a big chunk of SAB Miller's business, focusing on your business. And you're going to have the 5 people we have in China focusing on your business. And there's something special about that.
Oh, it is. And it's one of those things too, especially right now, you say we're very early on. You're right. We're what, 20 years into, or 25 years into the digital commerce revolution. You're seeing all these changes right now, especially around delivery innovation. I think there's a lot of things that have yet to even happen. We're right at the very beginning. What an incredible time to sort of amass a critical mass of all of these capabilities. I'm a big fan. I hope I'm not coming off as being bearish.
No. I think what's interesting is, because we all live in our little myopic worlds, and our focus groups are smaller and smaller. You just forget how much of the world doesn't believe what you believe, or doesn't know what you know. For example. And it's just true in commerce. It's true in all the businesses we touch. Like 100% of the people I talk to know about something. But if I go out in the world and just talk to people in the street, most of the time their behavior is different. They're so far behind the adoption curve. And something that always has to stay in the back of our minds is most people are still so far behind the adoption curve as it relates to most things that we get involved with.
There is this phenomenon, though, the power and the scale that we have of e-commerce to taste make in the culture. A great example of this would be, look at how Target has rebranded and most of its in-house brands. You look at the private label that they're executing, and they've all been sort of millennial blanded to the point where you could mistake them for e-commerce, bougie direct-to-consumer millennial brands. It's a mark of quality now. And what's interesting about that is this is also less than 10% of all of e-commerce activity is, some sort of direct-to-consumer engagement, but yet it has had such a fundamental impact on the way that brands are developed in-house. I wonder how far removed, do we see a similar kind of a shift happening? Does the way people engage with brands on Amazon also impact the way physical retail is done, or the way they perceive physical retail?
Clearly, the showrooming factor is real, where people go and they compare pricing and options. So you're, from a retail standpoint, no matter how many options you have in store, it's almost like you're competing against the world of all options in many cases. So I think the bigger shift, which is what you're referencing in Target, and this got me excited about this business many years ago, even before I was doing it, is just this notion that there's a willingness to accept and try new brands that didn't exist before. And many years ago, I had sort of been part of a research study, commissioned a research study about brand choice. And a lot of what the results came back as said that after the economic meltdown in 2008 and 2009, a whole generation of people just got sort of disillusioned with existing brands. They saw the government failed them, particularly financial institutions failed them. And you saw this shift, and I don't know if you remember, but all of a sudden it was like you didn't see as many Budweiser ads as you did, but you saw craft brewery ads like Blue Moon, still owned by Budweiser, right? But the story behind the brand mattered, and I think what's really changed in retail, and what you're seeing in Target, is this notion of the story mattering more, and people's wanting to believe and believe that they're buying a product with a greater vision or sense. And I think that is very real. And when we look at acquisition targets, it certainly makes it exciting for us. Like the Asterwood one you mentioned, started by a brother and sister. They built it. They tested the products themselves. There's a real specialness around the story. And I think that is likely to impact things more than Amazon just by itself.
Do you think that brand story comes through in the Amazon purchase experience, or is that something that's more akin?
I don't think it does today, but I think when you look at sort of how retail will change, and I think it will on Amazon over time. I think there, if I don't say this with any inside information, if I look at places where they're going to invest, it's giving brands the bigger opportunity to communicate who they are and what their value is. And, when you think about like what they stand for at Amazon, it's, making the customer happy, right? And making sure the customer, gets products they like. And what are things that make the customer happy is understanding and believing in the quality of the products they buy and buying it at a good price. Right.
It's such an interesting phenomenon because so much of e-commerce and direct-to-consumer is focused around startup culture and sort of this the cult of the founder. So we wind up celebrating a lot of starting line and not a lot of finish line. You guys are very much focused on the finish line, right? Like it's a brand making an exit to create a new opportunity as a second a new phase of the company. At the same time, Boosted is sort of right at the beginning of its journey. I'm curious, and very few people actually answer this honestly, so I'm going to challenge you, Keith. What are the things you've not done well so far? What are some of the things that some of your acquisitions have not done well so far, and how are you going to address that? What do you do to fix it?
I think if you go back to the sort of history of the company, right? I mean, we started, COVID hit. We had an original thesis, like everyone in the world. That thesis was on its way to being something, and all of a sudden we had to adjust how we think about both building a company and what the world itself was going to be like. So I think we took a very thoughtful approach in a lot of cases. I think one of the things we look back on is maybe we didn't need to be so thoughtful. When you're in a market where things are going up anyway, and when you have faith in the overall conviction, sometimes you don't need to maybe ask as many questions. And maybe we should have pulled the trigger on some more deals earlier. Honestly, there's stuff that we saw that we're like, yeah, it's clearly good, right? We really believe in it, but right now we're just still waiting to see a little bit about what the world is going to look like, or we're still building our infrastructure, and we want to make sure we don't die from indigestion, call it, right? So I think probably when I look back, it was maybe being a little too precious in some cases. I think outside of that, it's almost going to seem like I'm answering the resume question by saying I'm too detail oriented. But where we kind of had some big lessons in the early stage is just understanding the takeover process of the business. And if for example, if we're really expert at marketing and we could fuel marketing, that doesn't necessarily mean we should do that immediately, because there's still a supply chain question, right? And there's other sorts of things we have to think through. So I think we learned lessons where we'd hit the gas on stuff only to have to stop because the supply chain couldn't keep up. And so the first few deals of last year really, every time we did something that we thought was amazing, we learned a good lesson. And so as we rolled into this year and had built up the infrastructure, we've certainly operated on all cylinders because I think we were methodical, and we'd kind of hit the gas, reflect, and kind of go from there. But I'm not sure if we had just hit the gas all around, it wouldn't have made that. We would have been probably just as fine.
I like that. That's an honest answer. Yeah. I do think that there's a universal challenge right now around sort of picking your bets. And there's so many. I think there's just plentitude. Is that the word? I don't know. there's a multitude of options, right?
Multitude is definitely a word.
Yeah, that's the word we're looking for. There's so many options in the marketplace. As a consumer, I think we're spoiled for choice, right? And I can only imagine what that's like from in your guys' position. I'm sure there's plenty of businesses that have strong fundamentals that you pass on for the sake of waiting for things to mature, waiting for things to shake out. I'm not trying to speak for you, but I can only guess that you said you have so many. What's the deal flow like? What's the volume like?
So deal flow in this space comes from a few different areas. First, obviously, there's inbounds, people that sure. That's know us, that have sort of either made a decision to sell or exploring. Then there's broker deals. Then there's our own independent outreach, proprietary outreach, and then there's referrals. Between that, there's an extraordinary amount of deal flow. What's interesting about the space, and someone told me this story from a similar industry a few weeks ago. So I'll paraphrase it. You would think that we run up against sort of people more than we do outside of the broker deals. And so the reality is almost everything we look at has some strong characteristics in one way or another. And that's what's really awesome about the industry. And so then it's just a function of going back to what we talked about earlier. Does someone in the company have a passion? Like, do we think this is going to be a business we want to be in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? Can we identify that they're there in a way that makes us, happy to own it, and that we won't feel like we're just owning some schlocky business or a company that sells a schlocky type product. And then finally, is there a price expectation that's reasonable? Once you kind of put it through all those filters, the amount of available businesses is still pretty large, but not as big as it was of the 40,000 pool that we talked about before. So.
Yeah, I'll give you the last word, Keith. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Can I get your outlook? Get a crystal ball. What do you think the next 3 years looks like? You think we're coming out of this COVID thing? Where do you think we're heading? And is physical retail going to come back in such a way that digital retail is going to have to figure out how to keep up?
I mean, I don't know where we're headed. I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't have a clue, but I do believe that whether it's 12 months or 60 months, that you can't turn back the changes that are happening, and it's just a better consumer experience in most cases to buy things online, to be able to compare, to have all those options you talked about. And thanks to all of the investment that's going in to the last mile delivery infrastructure, it's going to get more and more satisfying. That dopamine that you have of just like, oh, I ordered it, now it's here, is just going to continue to fuel the growth and the expectations from both the product side and the distributor side. And so our true north is just making sure that we're able to keep up with that, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if COVID comes back. I don't know if there's another pandemic next year, but I do know that those things are just fundamental things that are changing that will no one's going back to the way it was before. So.
Keith, you don't have a crystal ball, but you definitely have a boost of commerce and confidence to give all of us like here. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Keith, for all your candor. Hey, I want to know what you think about the next generation of commerce and FBA, all things we talked about here today. Tell me what we got right and wrong. Drop us a line at hello@futurecommerce.fm. Hey, remember, we can all change the future through commerce, and we can create the future that we want. So let's do that together. Thank you for listening to Future Commerce.